There is a strange paradox at the heart of individuals who fear intimacy. They move through relationships like wanderers, longing for connection, yet terrified of being consumed by it. Many people assume these individuals simply don't feel deeply, but this is far from the truth. They feel intensely, sometimes even more than others, but those feelings threaten the very sense of self they have been protecting since childhood. So instead of stepping forward, they retreat. Instead of speaking their heart, they hide it. And instead of surrendering to love, they create distance, silence, and emotional invisibility, hoping to maintain control of a world that once felt overwhelming. The shocking truth is that avoidant individuals do not fall in love the way others do. They do not fall in love because of emotional closeness, romantic intensity, or grand gestures. They fall in love only when something very specific happens inside them, a profound inner shift that allows them to feel safe with another human being while still remaining themselves. Until this shift happens, no amount of affection, loyalty, or devotion can make them open their heart. They will appreciate it, they may even admire it, but they will not trust it. Because trust for them is not a gift. It is a risk that feels like losing the very identity they have spent years constructing. Avoidant individuals carry an inner contradiction. One part of them longs for connection, craving the warmth of being seen and understood. But another part guards the gates of their heart fiercely, convinced that closeness equals danger. This internal conflict creates a psychological battlefield where desire and fear wage an endless war. It is not that they don't want love. It is that love threatens to awaken emotions they learned long ago to silence. When someone steps too close, their instinctive response is to pull away, not because they dislike the person, but because the closeness awakens memories of vulnerability they vowed never to experience again. So what is the this that must happen first? It is the moment when the avoidant feels that their autonomy is fully respected, when they understand, not through words but through experience, that they do not need to sacrifice their independence in order to connect with someone. They fall in love when they realize that the relationship is not a cage, but a space large enough for both souls to exist freely. This realization is the turning point. It dismantles the unconscious fear that intimacy equals entrapment, allowing them to approach closeness not as a threat, but as a possibility. The person who opens an avoidant's heart is not the one who pushes for emotional intensity, nor the one who demands vulnerability, nor the one who floods them with affection. The person who opens their heart is the one who shows, through calm presence and balanced distance, that they can remain connected while honoring boundaries. They bring consistency without pressure, warmth without suffocation, and interest without pursuit. In that environment, the avoidant discovers something they have rarely felt: freedom inside connection. And that feeling becomes the doorway through which love can finally enter. Once this internal shift occurs, everything changes. The avoidant begins to express emotions slowly, cautiously, but genuinely. They no longer feel the need to hide behind distance or intellectualization. The fear that once controlled them loses its power, and they begin to show the depth of devotion that was always there, buried beneath years of self-protection. Their love may unfold quietly, but it is steady, loyal, and surprisingly intense. Because when an avoidant finally chooses love, they choose it with intention, not impulse. They choose it because it feels safe, not because it feels overwhelming. The shocking truth is that avoidant individuals are capable of profound, enduring love, love that is stable, committed, and deeply rooted. But they cannot enter that love until safety replaces fear, autonomy replaces defensiveness, and freedom replaces the old belief that closeness equals danger. Once this inner transformation occurs, the avoidant does not just fall in love. they finally allow themselves to be loved. The avoidant's heart is governed by an unconscious fear, not a lack of feeling, and understanding this truth reshapes the way we interpret their behavior. Most people assume emotional distance means emotional emptiness, but for the avoidant, distance is a shield, not a void. It is a psychological armor forged early in life, built from moments where their needs were ignored, minimized, or smothered. Their mind learned a simple rule: closeness is unpredictable and sometimes painful, so it is safer to rely on oneself. Over time, this rule became automatic, buried deep beneath the surface, operating outside conscious awareness. What looks like indifference is actually a sophisticated survival strategy, protecting a part of them that learned long ago to fear emotional dependence. They are not cold, they are cautious. They are not unfeeling. They are overwhelmed by feelings that have no safe channel for expression. Beneath their calm exterior lies an internal world that is sensitive, perceptive, and often easily hurt. But because these feelings are intense, they fear being consumed by them. They detach not because they don't care, but because caring too much triggers anxiety they don't know how to manage. Their emotional withdrawal is a reflex, a patterned response designed to keep their inner world from collapsing under the weight of vulnerability. When someone gets close, instead of feeling warm connection, the avoidance nervous system interprets it as pressure or invasion. Their heart speeds up, their defenses rise, and their instinct is to retreat. This retreat is not rejection, it is self-preservation. They believe that letting someone in means losing control, and losing control is the one thing they will not risk. Many people misunderstand this and take it personally, but the avoidance distance is rarely about the other person. It is about the internal fear that intimacy will demand more from them than they know how to give. This fear is rooted in early relational patterns that shaped their understanding of connection. If, as a child, they felt emotionally unseen, or if closeness came with conditions or criticism, they learned to guard themselves. What they fear most is not love itself, but the vulnerability that love requires. They fear needing someone because needing someone exposes them to disappointment. They fear being known because being known exposes their tender inner world. They fear relying on another because relying on another means surrendering the illusion of complete self-sufficiency. To them, emotional independence feels like safety, and emotional dependence feels like danger. This belief becomes so deeply embedded that even when they desire closeness, they cannot relax into it. Instead, they create distance to regain equilibrium. Their heart wants connection, but their mind fears the consequences of it. This internal conflict makes relationships with avoidant individuals confusing for both sides. Partners feel warmth one day and coldness the next, love in one moment and detachment in another. It feels inconsistent, but for the avoidant, it is consistency. Approach when it feels safe, withdraw when it feels threatening. They may long for closeness, but the moment they sense expectations, demands, or emotional pressure, they instinctively pull back. This creates the impression of mixed signals. But what is really happening is that their attachment system is trying to protect them from overwhelm. Their emotional world is more complex than they show, and their silence often contains more fear than apathy. They understand love, but they struggle to trust it. Trust requires vulnerability, and vulnerability is the doorway to the very pain they spent a lifetime avoiding. The profound truth is that avoidant individuals are not incapable of love. They are capable of deep, intense attachment, but that attachment is locked behind fear. Their heart is not closed, it is guarded. It waits for safety before it risks opening. Once that safety exists, their defenses soften and their capacity for love becomes surprisingly strong. But until then, Their unconscious fear will continue to guide their behavior, shaping their responses to intimacy and shielding them from the vulnerability they so deeply associate with danger. The avoidant cannot fall in love until their inner conflict between desire and self-protection is resolved, and this conflict is far deeper and more complicated than most people realize. Inside them, two opposing forces are constantly at war. One part longs for closeness, connection, warmth, and the feeling of being chosen. This part craves intimacy just as strongly as anyone else and, in fact, often feels emotions with great intensity. But another part inside them sees closeness as a threat, a loss of control, a surrender of autonomy, or a return to a kind of vulnerability that once felt unbearable. This second part is the protector, the guardian of their inner world, and it has been trained through years of emotional conditioning to keep others at a distance. These two forces do not communicate harmoniously. They clash, creating an inner tension that the avoidant experiences every time someone gets too close. On the surface, this conflict plays out as inconsistency. They may initiate closeness one moment and then disappear the next. They may reveal a personal detail and then immediately shut down emotionally afterward. They may show affection, crave attention, or enjoy intimacy. Yet once it becomes emotionally meaningful, panic rises and they pull back. This push-pull dynamic isn't intentional manipulation. It is the psychological tug-of-war between two parts of themselves that don't know how to coexist. The desire for connection pulls them forward, but the instinct for self-protection pulls them backward. Until these two internal forces become integrated, love feels like both a longing and a threat, something they want but cannot allow themselves to fully have. Their fear of closeness often stems from early relational experiences that taught them connections come with expectations, demands, loss of freedom, or emotional overwhelm. As children, they may have felt that their feelings didn't matter unless they served someone else's needs. They learned to cope by relying on themselves, by shrinking emotional expression, or by becoming emotionally self-sufficient long before they understood what intimacy meant. This early pattern becomes the blueprint for adult relationships. So when a partner approaches them with emotional intimacy, their unconscious mind doesn't interpret it as love. It interprets it as a threat to autonomy. The instinctive reaction is to protect the self by withdrawing, minimizing, or shutting down. This is why words, reassurance, and affection rarely resolve their fear. These gestures often amplify their internal conflict because they activate the part of them that longs for closeness, while simultaneously triggering the part that fears engulfment. The more someone tries to pull them closer, the more their defensive system activates. Pressure, whether emotional or unspoken, intensifies the fear that they will be trapped, controlled, or forced into vulnerability they don't feel ready for. This isn't a conscious choice. It is a reflex embedded in their nervous system, shaped by years of learning that intimacy can cost them their sense of self. The inner conflict also explains why avoidant individuals often appear calmer or more distant during emotionally charged moments. The protector part of their psyche steps in instantly, shutting down emotional expression to keep them safe from feeling overwhelmed. They detach, intellectualize, minimize, or distract themselves. Their partner may interpret this as not caring, but it is actually the avoidance version of surviving emotional tension. They believe that if they allow themselves to be swept into the emotional intensity of another person, they will lose control. So they protect themselves by withdrawing into a self-contained world where no one can intrude, judge, or disappoint them. Because of this, avoidants do not fall in love from constant closeness, emotional intensity, or romantic pursuit. These experiences amplify the part of them that fears intimacy. Instead, they fall in love when the internal protector finally relaxes enough to let desire and vulnerability coexist. This only happens when they recognize that the relationship does not threaten their autonomy, their identity, or their emotional equilibrium. They must feel safe enough to let someone enter their inner world without losing themselves in the process. This safety is not created through pressure. It is created through an experience of emotional space, consistency, and respect for boundaries. When the inner conflict begins to resolve, the avoidant stops seeing closeness as a danger and starts seeing it as a choice. They begin to differentiate between healthy connection and the overwhelming closeness they feared in childhood. They slowly learn that being loved does not require them to betray themselves. When this internal shift happens, their desire for connection becomes stronger than their impulse to protect themselves, and only then can they open their heart fully. Until that moment, love remains something they want, but cannot yet allow themselves to receive. The moment of transformation for an avoidant person happens only when they feel safe enough for the unconscious to rise into the conscious, and this shift is far more profound than it appears on the surface. Avoidants live with a mind that is divided. One layer of their psyche operates with carefully controlled logic, independence, and emotional restraint. This is the conscious layer, the one they present to the world, but beneath that lies an emotional undercurrent they rarely acknowledge. This unconscious layer carries old wounds, unexpressed needs, fears of engulfment, and unresolved memories of moments when closeness felt dangerous or overwhelming. These two layers exist in tension, and an avoidant person relies heavily on the conscious layer to maintain control. They fear that if they allow the deeper layer to surface, it will disrupt the emotional order they have built to protect themselves. This is why avoidants appear calm, self-contained, and even aloof. Their conscious mind is constantly managing, suppressing, or redirecting emotional impulses that feel unpredictable. When someone becomes important to them, however, the unconscious begins to stir. They feel things they don't know how to process. Their body reacts before their mind understands. They may suddenly feel anxious after a moment of connection, irritated after intimacy, or overwhelmed after vulnerability. These reactions confuse their partners, but for the avoidant, they signal their unconscious leaking through the cracks. This is not yet love. It is the beginning of internal disruption. Love requires integration, and integration requires safety. The key, therefore, is not intensity, reassurance, or emotional pressure. Those things overwhelm the unconscious even further. What truly matters is the creation of a space in which the avoidant does not feel threatened, judged, or expected to surrender their independence. Emotional safety for them is not about affection. It is about the absence of internal alarm. They need to feel that opening up will not cost them their autonomy, dignity, or sense of self. Only when their nervous system relaxes enough to allow unconscious fears to surface without panic can they begin to process them consciously. This is the internal doorway through which transformation begins. Safety for an avoidant often shows up in subtle ways. It's in the quiet moments where they feel accepted exactly as they are, without demands for emotional performance. It's in the consistent presence of someone who is neither too close nor too distant, someone who stands near without trying to cross their boundaries. It's in the feeling that their inner world won't be invaded the moment they open it slightly. When they experience this kind of safety repeatedly, something shifts. Their protectiveness softens, not because the fear is gone, but because the fear is finally acknowledged rather than defended against. They begin to realize that connection does not automatically lead to loss of self. This recognition allows their unconscious needs, intimacy, closeness, tenderness, to rise without being immediately shut down. As this happens, the avoidant starts to feel a sense of internal coherence. Their emotional reactions make more sense to them. Instead of panicking when they feel connected, they begin to observe the reaction, rather than run from it. Instead of withdrawing immediately after vulnerability, they sit with the discomfort long enough to understand it. This is the moment their conscious and unconscious layers begin to align. It is not dramatic. It is quiet, slow, and deeply internal. But it is the moment where genuine emotional openness becomes possible. The avoidant's capacity for love is directly tied to this inner integration. When the unconscious is no longer suppressed but allowed to exist openly, their emotions become more regulated, their trust deepens, and their fear of engulfment decreases. They begin to understand that closeness does not equate to danger, and connection does not require the destruction of their autonomy. They start to express themselves more openly, not because someone forced them to, but because they no longer need to hide their inner world. Once this transformation occurs, the avoidant becomes capable of real intimacy, the kind that grows steadily, quietly, and with great depth. Their love becomes more intentional, more grounded, and more reliable. They choose connection not out of obligation or fear of losing someone, but because their internal world is finally safe enough to welcome it. Until this inner shift happens, however, their heart remains guarded, not out of disinterest, but because the unconscious fear still holds the keys. Only when that fear softens into awareness can love take its rightful place in their life. An avoidant person falls in love not when someone gets closer, but when someone proves they can stay connected without invading, and this truth captures the core paradox of their emotional world. For most people, love deepens through increasing intimacy, more vulnerability, and growing emotional closeness. But for the avoidant, closeness is the very thing that triggers their instinct to pull away. Their nervous system interprets emotional intensity as pressure, their mind interprets expectations as threats, and their inner protector perceives vulnerability as a loss of independence. Because of this, the traditional path to love, deepening closeness, actually activates their defenses instead of their affection. The avoidant heart opens along a very different route, one where they witness that someone can be present without overwhelming, consistent without suffocating, and caring without trying to control or consume them. This distinction matters because avoidants experience intimacy as something that has historically come with invisible costs. In their earlier relationships, often starting in childhood, closeness may have meant losing freedom, having their feelings dismissed, or being expected to meet someone else's emotional needs at the expense of their own. These early patterns shaped their understanding of connection, teaching them that the more someone wants from them, the less safe they feel. So when a partner leans in heavily, expresses strong emotions quickly, or pushes for closeness, the avoidant's internal alarm system activates. They begin to retreat, not because the person isn't valuable, but because the dynamic feels too familiar. Closeness means losing space, and losing space means losing the self. Therefore, the only time they relax into connection is when they feel their identity will not be swallowed by someone else's emotional expectations. This is why the person who wins an avoidant's heart is not the one who tries the hardest to break down their walls. It is the person who can be close without crossing boundaries. It is the person who can care deeply without pressuring them to open up on command. It is the person who chooses connection but does not chase it. In this environment, the avoidant learns something revolutionary. They can be emotionally attached without giving up their autonomy. They can share parts of themselves without being expected to surrender the whole. They can be loved without being controlled. This is the moment where their fear begins to dissolve and their desire begins to grow. One of the most misunderstood realities about avoidance is that they crave connection just as much as anyone else. They simply fear that connection will come at a cost. When someone shows they can maintain their own emotional stability, handle their own needs, and remain grounded even when the avoidant pulls back temporarily, It creates a sense of safety the avoidant rarely experiences. They learn that the relationship can breathe. They learn that space is not a threat to the bond. They learn that distance doesn't mean abandonment and closeness doesn't mean invasion. This balance, connection without pressure, is the exact psychological environment in which their nervous system can relax instead of defend. In that relaxation, affection begins to grow. But this shift is subtle and often slow. Avoidants test with distance, not to manipulate, but to measure safety. They watch how someone responds to silence, to slow emotional pacing, or to moments where they need independence. If the person reacts with panic, pressure, guilt, or emotional intensity, the avoidant's fear is confirmed and they retreat further. But if the person remains steady, caring without overreaching, the avoidant finally breathes. It is in that breath that their feelings start to awaken. They realize they can exist fully as themselves without being pushed into emotional territory they aren't ready to enter yet. And once they see that, the protective walls they've lived behind begin to soften. This newfound sense of safety allows the avoidant to reframe intimacy from something suffocating to something expansive. They begin to understand that connection doesn't have to shrink them, it can actually support them. They start reaching out, sometimes in small and surprising ways. A deeper conversation, a moment of vulnerability, a gesture of affection, or a willingness to spend more consistent time together. These behaviors grow organically when they feel safe, not when they feel pressured. Their heart opens in quiet increments, each step signaling trust, each movement showing that love is no longer a threat to their identity. And once the avoidant falls in love under these conditions, their love becomes incredibly steady, because it wasn't forced, it wasn't chased, and it wasn't born under pressure. It was born from safety, autonomy, and genuine connection, the three things their heart needed most in order to open. Only when someone shows they can stay connected without invading does the avoidant finally step forward willingly, allowing love to unfold on solid, lasting ground. Healing the split within the avoidant self is the true key to unlocking their ability to love, because inside every avoidant person lives a quiet conflict between two powerful inner forces, the part that longs for intimacy and the part that fears it. These two forces are not mild opposites. They function like separate psychological identities that rarely agree. One identity yearns for closeness, warmth, and emotional understanding. It wants to be seen, held, and chosen. It craves the very feelings that love brings. But the other identity is shaped by old wounds, memories of being overwhelmed, dismissed, or emotionally unsupported. This part believes that closeness threatens autonomy, that vulnerability leads to loss, and that relying on another person is dangerous. It has spent years constructing emotional walls to protect itself, even when those walls create loneliness. The avoidant person lives between these two selves, and until this internal divide softens, real love cannot take root. This internal split shows up in the avoidant's behavior in ways that seem contradictory from the outside. They want connection but avoid it. They enjoy closeness but retreat after intimacy. They express affection but freeze when emotions deepen. To their partner, this looks inconsistent and confusing. But to the avoidant, this push-pull dynamic is the only way they know to manage the internal war happening inside them. The longing self pushes them toward closeness, but the protective self quickly pulls them away to prevent emotional overload. Both selves believe they are doing what is right, but together they create emotional chaos. The avoidant person cannot love deeply while these two psychological forces remain divided, because love requires inner unity, an agreement between desire and safety. Healing this split does not happen through willpower or pressure or emotional demands. It happens slowly, through repeated experiences where intimacy does not feel threatening. The avoidant has to learn, sometimes for the first time, that closeness can coexist with freedom. They need to discover that emotional connection does not require them to sacrifice their identity or autonomy. For this to happen, the protective part of their psyche must gradually relax, realizing that the world outside their defenses is not as dangerous as it once felt. This requires a relational environment where expectations are balanced, boundaries respected, and space is not equated with abandonment. Only in conditions where they are allowed to breathe emotionally can the avoidant begin integrating the part of them that longs for closeness with the part that fears it. This integration process is subtle but transformative. At first, the avoidant may not even recognize the shift happening within them. They simply start feeling less threatened by vulnerability and less overwhelmed by connection. Their nervous system begins responding differently, less panic, more curiosity. Their emotional world becomes easier to navigate. Instead of shutting down at the first sign of closeness, they start to tolerate it, then appreciate it, and eventually seek it. The longing self gains strength, not because the protective self disappears, but because the two finally learn to coexist. The avoidant begins to understand that they can hold both independence and connection at the same time, that needing someone does not mean losing themselves, and that love does not demand the collapse of their inner boundaries. This healing also changes how the avoidant expresses love. Instead of withholding emotions out of fear, they start communicating more openly. Instead of retreating when things become meaningful, they stay present long enough to grow. Instead of interpreting closeness as a threat, they view it as a choice they can make without sacrificing their autonomy. This internal shift allows them to show affection, offer trust, and remain emotionally available in ways that once felt impossible. Their love becomes more reliable because it is no longer fighting with hidden fears. It becomes more stable because it emerges from integration rather than fragmentation. And it becomes more profound because it is rooted in a self that finally feels safe enough to remain open. When this internal healing takes place, the avoidant person doesn't just fall in love. They allow themselves to be loved, which is often the deeper challenge. Accepting love means accepting vulnerability, and accepting vulnerability means trusting another person with parts of themselves they once protected fiercely. It means believing that closeness can enrich rather than diminish them. It means recognizing that love does not require them to disappear. And when they reach this point, their ability to love becomes powerful and enduring, marked by loyalty, depth, and a steadiness that comes from overcoming the very fears that used to control them. Only by healing the split between longing and fear can the avoidant open their heart fully, letting love finally take its rightful place within them.